Hey there, Film Buds. Welcome back to the Film Buds podcast. I'm your host, Paul.
And I'm Lauren.
And this is episode 238.
Wow.
We are continuing with our Hispanic Heritage Month celebration. Actually, it's officially today. It started. It's September 15th.
But, upon you listening to this, it'll be the 16th because we're doing this on Thursday.
That's right. So, but we are now officially into, the official celebration window. It goes from mid-September to mid-October, September 15th to October 15th. So we're now officially into the proper celebration.
Yeah, it was destined that we recorded today.
And it's been a really great month so far. I've really enjoyed it. A lot of different tones, a lot of different textures. Cinematically, we had Nick on. Today is, of course, going to be a very different episode. We're now dealing with a documentary. Mm-hmm. We decided... since last year we only did the 2 episodes, this year was a real question of what do we do for the full month, and I wanted to in some way go and touch on real life history and do a documentary in some way where we could really do a dive into earnest history, even if it is through some sort of lens or perspective. A documentary gives you at least a glance at history, especially if that's sort of the intent of the documentary.
I mean, I think you really nailed it with this one. It hit all of your things that you said that it should.
And also I think that this scratched one of my favorite itches, which is finding fascinating new history.
Oh, you do like to unravel an entire ball of yarn that is history.
Yeah, I enjoy going down and discovering the connectivity, of American history movements, but also how history has echoes, of people doing similar things at similar times all around the world. We'll call it the Sandrum. The
sandwich thing.
The sandwich conundrum, or the sandwich effect, yes.
I love that you just mooshed them together into one word.
Yeah. I know. There's no way for me to edit it out. I'm really fucked on that one. Forever embarrassed.
It's not even that bad. I thought it was funny. I was I had no idea where you would come up with that combination. It's fantastic.
And so, but no, well, it's the similar idea though, these echoes of history sort of repeating similar ideas at different places.
Yeah, it's the chair thing as well. Every society has some version of a thing to sit on, because it was a basic human need that every society was like, I think we should have this.
Maybe Young was onto something.
Maybe.
And so, before we get too far into it, today's episode is all about Ruben Salazar, Man in the Middle, by Phillip Rodriguez. And it's about a Mexican-American journalist who ended up dying tragically young. It's a PBS documentary. It's fascinating. But the place that he grew up in was El Paso and Juarez. And so I guess, part of the episode is also definitely, about the border and border topics, and so is the movie. And so I guess just out of general curiosity, what familiarity do you have with the very large swath of America that makes up the Mexican-American border?
Oh gosh, I've never been to the border. I've honestly, I don't think that I've ever been to a city close to the border. I mean, you're more familiar with the landscape of Texas than I am. I've been to Dallas. I've been to Houston. And I think that might actually be pretty much it of Texas for me. One, it's a huge state, but also we never really did like road trips or anything out that far because like we were always East Coast people. And so I like from truly the Mississippi over, my knowledge of the American West is just as sparse as I guess, the pioneers thought.
Fair enough.
I mean, not saying like anything bad about it. I've just like personally never gotten the opportunity to venture that far in wide sweeping. I've been to California, but that's nowhere near the border. So
yeah, depending on where you are,
Yeah, I was in LA, so LA is not anywhere. California, another huge state.
Yeah.
East Coast, you can like pop through states every few hours. You can feel like a real road trip champion. You get to the West Coast, you're like, all right, we've been in this state for 20 whole 4 hours.
No, that's fair. I did grow up, of course, in Texas. I have been in every state that touches the Mexican-American border. And I have actually been to El Paso a few times. I've driven through El Paso and stayed in El Paso for a little bit of time. And it is fascinating because it is like a literal border town in the sense of like there's a stretch of interstate that as you're, especially on the eastbound side of it, if you look out to your right, you're looking directly at Mexico, and you can see the full town of Juarez, the roads. You can see cars and vehicles and things like that moving around, and so it is really fascinating to travel through and visit El Paso even briefly, just because of the fact that you can directly look over and see, just even fleetingly, Mexico. And so that's kind of, like a really interesting, it is a fascinating town. Especially because growing up, you heard all sorts of stories about, border towns and the border growing up in Texas. I mean, you were inundated, on a certain level.
Oh, I'm sure. They breed you young.
All sorts of information, opinions, stories, positive and negative, about the border. It was really, really fascinating because, the same people that will also tell you a horror story about the border will also then go back and tell you, some sort of crazy story that they had going over, into Mexico and having a good time and coming back into America, and so it was really fascinating growing up in a state attached to the border, especially with such a complicated history to the Mexican-American border as Texas.
That's such an American thing to do, be like, oh, I like to party in Mexico and then come back home, We're so trashy when we go to other countries.
Yeah. Don't worry about that.
But I think that's also probably stemmed in the same place of why, like, people are so anti-immigration. They're like, but they don't go back home after they trash our shit,
And so I think that's, a really interesting... It is fascinating to grow up in that place, and...
I'm sure.
It's also, it puts a lot of things into a lot of very particular perspective as well. Mm-hmm. And so I can't imagine what it would have been like also to grow up, and especially being as aware, as our subject of our documentary, Ruben Salazar, is of his identity. I can't imagine what it must have been like to spend 5-10 years watching Juarez and El Paso grow.
No, for sure. Honestly, like I was gonna touch on that a little bit. You know, this idea of being just a stone's throw away from where your people were.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that concept is so foreign to me as a, you know, African American person, as a person whose ancestry didn't have any choice, and it's so far removed as well. You know, he's first generation,
not just by time but space.
Yeah, you know, just literal, like, there's no like, oh, you know, just over there.
If I stand on Savannah's coast with a spyglass, I can look over and see a village in Africa. Like,
Yeah,
that's not
you
an
know,
option for you.
No, and it's just, I'm sure that duality was really hard, because I think that also a lot of Hispanic, you know, narratives are about this dual you know, lineage of being so close to what the traditions were, but also now being this new thing and what that means. Whereas, like, you know, for me and my family, you know, the struggles were different because we were already fully American. It was the issues of the homeland that it was the issue. You know, this is my homeland. This is the homeland of my ancestors. You know, I have truly no ties at this point to Africa, but I'm sure that this was like, you know, who are you in that kind of world?
Yeah.
Where you're neither nor.
Well, and this is also, I guess, particularly topical because there has been a recent study that estimates that there might be a chance that, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong about this if I misunderstood, but there's a chance that Texas either is or is about to be officially more Hispanic in population than white. And so I think that Texas is such a fascinating state for me, just even in terms of its history and its demographics. You know, like, I grew up in a community that had been traditionally majority white, and I didn't grow up there, but I did some teaching in a community that had been majority white, and then it started to, over just the few years that I was, you know, catching up to it, essentially, as a community, it was largely booming in a Hispanic population. And part of that was some of the suburban sprawl of Houston, as well as a city where certain communities were being displaced because of Houston becoming more expensive in certain areas.
It's amazing how areas can almost segregate themselves depending on, you know, accessibility.
And so it's a fascinating sort of case study in a lot of different ways. Like, it's a really interesting place, and I think that this documentary, Man in the Middle, really touched on a lot of things that I find particularly interesting about Texas and about identity as well. And so I think that without any further ado, we should go ahead and jump on into this.
Yeah, let's do it.
So Ruben Salazar, Man in the Middle, is, like I said, a PBS documentary. It was released April 29th, 2014. It's 53 minutes long. It's rated TV PG. Don't worry, guys. PBS didn't get racy with this one. You know, I know that they like to, but they held back on this one. It is directed by Phillip Rodriguez. The summary is Ruben Salazar, Man in the Middle, an investigative look at the life and mysterious death of pioneering journalist Ruben Salazar. And our only cast member, if you will have one, is Michael Manuel as the voice of Ruben Salazar for some readings of things that Ruben wrote. And I guess without any further ado, I'll pass it off to you, dear. What did you think of Man in the Middle?
Oh, I really enjoyed this a lot. I had never heard of Ruben Salazar. But also, he was in like LA was like his home place for a really long time of his life in Texas. So I'm sure that just his story didn't reach old Virginia, and I found it fascinating. This kid, growing up on the, as we talked about earlier, on the border of two identities, but also technically because of America at this time not being considered really either of them.
Mm-hmm.
He was Mexican born, but moved to the States when he was 2 and lived the rest of his life in the States. And so, for all intents and purposes, he was American.
Well, and on the census at that time.
He was also, Mexicans were labeled as white in the census, which I find fascinating. I did not know that. That was something that I learned. How things have reversed. But it was still like not in a way that was, kind, I guess, either.
Because you weren't necessarily recognized. You didn't get any of the privilege of being white.
Yeah, no, you just got counted as white, but you were still a second, class citizen next to whites. You got to live in the neighborhood, but not like go to the parties kind of deal.
It's almost kind of in that weird racial nebulous area of spaghetti westerns.
Oh, yeah.
Where once upon a time Italians were considered, racially inferior. But also that same sort of thought process about how Italians look also was sort of transplanted into this sort of image of what Hispanics look like. And that sort of weird, also just racial language about them as well. Is not dissimilar.
I think that that's super fair, and honestly, I think that it's kind of also like kind of based in physical features as well. More Mexican people and Hispanic people just in general have like usually, I guess, whiter textured hair than your average black person does. So I think that also kind of helped. It took them less time, I guess, to fit into the norm of what society looked like. Than black society, which was deemed the most inferior.
Well, and assimilation, they talk about in this documentary being something that like Ruben's parents' generation
just
really
fully
strived for, was full assimilation.
No, and I thought that was just, I found a lot of this like echoing people's stories and of people that I know, or stories that I've heard of people even today being first generation in the States, and what does this mean? You either live in a house that fully embraces being American 100%, and that means a purging of all things anti-American, or you get the household that holds on to the traditions of the ethnicity, as well, just transitions those traditions here onto an American soil, but is living in America, an American lifestyle with the traditions that have been passed on for generations. Because it's, it's really this mindset of what the legacy needs to be, and I understand completely why Ruben's parents' generation were like, we need to strip ourselves entirely of whatever makes us different, because we've seen what happens to those that are different here in America in the 20s. It's not great. And even him growing up, into the 50s, and it still doesn't get great. And I love the fact that he goes through this whole transition along with the kind of American history almost. The clean, buttoned up version of him in the 50s becomes this rebellious force in the 70s. And I think that's so fascinating, and impactful of this kind of journey through life, and this taking what your parents' generation has told you and analyzing it and realizing that maybe not all of that is the right answer, and there are some things that make us different that we should be proud of.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and stop trying to put us in this box. Because not all of us want to be in this box, and we shouldn't have to be in the box.
Yeah.
You know, and I really found him super fascinating because, like, he also was this troubled person, you know. He didn't marry a Hispanic woman and lived a very white bread American life up until the point of him realizing his own revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there aren't that many brave people today. I don't think.
And you know, he was hitting this personal stride, you know, late 30 moving into 40.
Mm-hmm.
And he was really still early
Mm-hmm.
in everything that he could have done.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you watch his journey in the documentary, if you know the story of Ruben, he was really starting to kick shit up only a few years before his untimely demise at the age of 42.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Gosh, he looks, it's one of those things where you're like, God, people in the past look so much older than they actually were. Like, I'm looking at pictures of him, and I swear that he was in his 50s.
Yeah.
But
And so it is truly unfortunate how his life went, and watching his life story, it's also one of those things for me that I definitely was like, where is this movie, this miniseries, this whatever? You know, how has this man been so under the radar, you know, as a fascinating figure? Because also he's a beautiful writer, and that was one thing that I really liked about, let's talk about specifically the merits of this documentary.
oh yes.
So the documentary, for the most part, is pretty boilerplate, and I don't mean that in like an offensive way. Like, it's a informative documentary. It's a great educational tool. It tells you what you need to know. The thing that makes this, for me, you know, just that cut above, is the access to some of Ruben Salazar's personal writings. And the man was just an absolutely beautiful writer.
Yes. No, I completely concur with that. I 100% agree. I loved his little blips into his mind, because, like, the one that really killed me was the one where he was talking about his wife.
Mm.
And, you know, how she wanted the household to be, you know, devoid of Mexican culture, basically. You know, they were Americans. And
are you talking specifically about the one about the naming of their child?
oh no, I was thinking of the one where he was in bed and he, like, turned over.
Yeah, it's about the naming of their child. Yeah.
Oh yes, because she didn't want anything.
They had given her a name that she had deemed was like a Hispanic name. And she was like, you know, you're going to make that harder for our child.
Yes.
And he just kind of just, like, turned over in bed and just, like, pretended to go to sleep, essentially.
And it was just hard, you know, to listen to that. And
profoundly personal stuff. Not only beautifully written, but profoundly personal. And so it allowed you to really look deeply into who this man was.
You know, how dare you just write a diary entry and have it be ready for the New York Times? You know, stop it.
And he was a writer to his bones.
I mean, honestly, yeah, he really found his calling. Exactly. And I think that the transition in Ruben's career is so fascinating, from when he is trying so hard not to be pigeonholed into being a Mexican. You know, he doesn't just want to talk about Mexican affairs and all of those things. He wants to get the real stories that all of the other guys get to write about. And it's not until he reconnects himself to the Mexican Americans in LA, you know,
and challenging essentially his audience publicly on essentially like, well, what are we then?
Yeah, you know, really stirring the pot on like these feelings that he had been feeling that he didn't realize other people were feeling as well. And I think he was liberated by this oneness with the group.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh, what were they? They called themselves the Chicanos.
Well, and I was about to say, it's so fascinating that we're able to, in real time, in historical record, through newspaper and different other entries, plot the reclamation of that word specifically.
Yes. I mean, honestly, the 60s and the 70s was a time for every racial group had a moment pretty much of being like, the word that you have used to put me down is mine now.
Mm-hmm.
I own it. You cannot use it anymore. It is done for you. It is for me to use as I please to identify myself with. It's a verb. You know, it's a...
Well, and it took a little bit longer, but it's like the word queer.
Exactly. But again, every marginalized group has a moment when they go, we're done being bullied by you.
This word no longer means what you've been using it as.
Yes, it is now a word of love.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a word of pride, a word of hope. You know, I can use it. You cannot use it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and no, I really this movie was very invigorating. And also the strange twist of his death really killed me.
His death, I will say, if I wanted to like bing the documentary about anything, for me, and I know that, like, we only had however much time PBS could allot, and I'm sure that was also budgetary things, because who wants to give money to the documentary about this guy?
Oh, no, I understand that feeling.
And so I'm sure that there were all sorts of problems, and so, like, for what it's worth, I love what this documentary informed me of. I would love to know more about this man.
Mm-hmm.
But I did feel like his death stuff felt like such a lead-in at the start of a promise of a question.
Yeah.
That then the payoff in the end, and I think that that's a problem of editing, is that it...
Well, yeah, the delivery just fell flat.
And so then it just goes whack, whack.
The delivery was absolutely terrible. It was like, it happened like this, so, like, get over it. And I was like, oh.
Especially since we hyped it so big in the beginning that I was like, oh.
Yeah,
and then it was like, oh.
We see court cases and stuff. It's like everything goes up to 11.5 billion%. And then they're like, okay.
It's kind of like if it turned out that OJ had legitimately not been guilty.
And, like, they looked through combed all of the details.
It was obvious it wasn't him.
Like, there was just no way that it...
We've got the wrong guy, you know? It's the same sort of level of, like, anticlimactic.
No, but I think that, also the symbol that was built around Ruben in his life, and I agree with you 100%. I think that this is a hidden gem of a story. You know, this man had not only a very interesting life, but also a crazy way of dying that, like, nobody else really in history is, like, you know, to this degree is, like, remembered for being hit in the head with a smoke bomb canister?
Tear gas, yeah.
Tear gas. It literally hit him like a projectile. Like, that's nuts. That's absolutely
I mean, like,
nuts.
honestly, if I think that, like, if I was, you know, doing the story of Ruben Salazar, you know, sort of as a movie or something, I think that I would probably start in the bar And I would have he and his friend come in, sit down. They would be speaking to each other. You would hear all this kerfuffle in the street. There'd be this, sort of loud buildup. We'd be pushing in, they'd get their drinks, we'd slowly be pushing in, and it would finally just become a close-up on him, and then just wham. You hear, like, faintly the shot of the tear gas, and then we would cut to black, and then we would go backwards.
Interesting. Sorry, you said, like, wham, and I was like, we really see this man get hit by this canister in, like, the first 2 minutes
he just
of this
gets
movie?
Taken out of frame. We don't know what happens exactly.
Well, you see, the imagination runs wild when you've got a theater degree, so details are helpful.
Okay. No, yeah, he gets taken out of frame. We don't know exactly what's happening.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's really interesting. I also really loved the aftermath of his death on this community. To your point that you made earlier, he had not been, stirring the pot for very long prior to his death. And I think that also, the circumstance of his death as well, the fact that he was doing this peaceful march
that then turned so wrong.
Yeah, and he was this rebellious reporter, this symbol of the Mexican American,
and he was
identity.
Potentially being followed by people. I mean, Hoover at that time was very known for,
if we're looking at the history of the era, like all of the things,
COINTELPRO and that sort of thing.
Yeah, things are checking off the boxes, and so like then he dies. Like this is Martin Luther King. It's exactly the same, but with a less, like...
Martin Fred Hampton,
Yeah, with a less satisfying ending for it. But
because this is, as far as we know, a legitimate freak accident.
Yeah, but, like, the fact that, he had also been joking about, oh, I don't want to be the martyr. I think you should be the martyr, What am I... Nobody's gonna follow me after I die. And like this symbol that he became that was bigger than even like he wanted to be. I think that you're totally right. I think that somebody should do this story. We did the Lucy, I Love Lucy version of this story. Basically, come on, it's another Hispanic American man married to a white American woman. Mm-hmm. But I think that we should do it from this man's perspective of his awakening into rebellion,
And getting cut down before he really even figured out exactly what the end goal of his journey was.
But don't they all?
Mm-hmm. So if you had to give Man in the Middle, the documentary, a score, what would you give it?
I'm going to give this documentary a 4. I think that all of the information was given to me solidly. I think that, the parts of this that really moved me, truly moved me. And then I think that they ran out of time. Mm-hmm. I think that we just needed to slap another 30 minutes on this thing and it would have been perfect. But I think that the end part of his story just got and then it stopped. And I think that that's a real downvote for me for just the follow through of it for me.
I'm gonna give it a 4 as well, and I also will ding it for his sort of big career failure moment. I also would have liked to have fleshed that out a little bit more about how he missed it.
Yeah.
How did it go so wrong for him at that moment?
No, and also I guess for me, I want to dive so much further into
lots of stuff.
Yeah, into his beginning years. I know that he worked on his school paper, but there's still a difference, especially now in the 50s when he was cutting his teeth. 40s, 50s. It's still challenging to break those barriers. So what about him
did it?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. People were going above and beyond for this kid. Why? Mm-hmm. Versus any other. Is it because he fit the mold so well? Until he got loud? I want to know. I truly just want to dive further into this. This was a great first step.
No, that's very fair. Moving on, I guess we'll talk about D23 recently happened, the Disney expose, the big...
Gosh, that's what all of those were from. Oh.
Yeah. So you can already guess how Lauren felt about a lot of it.
I'm so sorry. No, I'm not subtle, I know.
So I'll say this. Secret Invasion looks like Marvel things. Hocus Pocus 2 leaves things to be desired. Disenchantment has promise, or Disenchanted.
Yes, I think
Which one is the Netflix show?
Disenchantment.
Okay. Disenchanted.
Because it's enchanted, and now we're disenchanted.
Yes. So Disenchanted has promise.
I think that it's probably, honestly, the most interesting looking one that we saw. I was like, I will watch this movie.
Overall, though, a lot of... I was interested in the Werewolves by Night one.
Oh, the one that looks like a black and white horror film.
Yeah, I wish that they were actually shooting on film, not doing a digital effect after the fact. But overall, I thought that it also conceptually looked like one of the more interesting things that they were trying.
Well, I liked it up until Marvel's name slapped all over it, and I said, oh no, it might be garbage. I literally, I was like, oh god.
What if it sucks?
Oh, it has the potential now, because now it's a part of this machine, whereas, like, when I didn't know that, I was like, oh,
I think
something
that's
new.
why they really do the, like, special presentation graphic on it, is to really try and be like, this is a step aside thing.
Oh god, but they're gonna sew it right on in there. They're gonna do some, like, it's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse thing where we're just gonna have noir Spider-Man hanging out with regular Spider-Man, and that's gonna be what they're gonna do, but except with super people whose names that I don't know. Because they killed off all the names I did know.
No, I get where you're at with that.
But it has potential, and I'll see what the next trailer gives us, because it'll give us always too much of the plot.
We also watched the I Want to Dance with Somebody trailer. Dear, what did you think?
It frustrates. It looks really flashy. It looks like they took all of Whitney's, like, best moments in history and slapped them into a really loose mother-daughter story.
Or Rise to Glory story.
Yeah. But if you're gonna give me a Whitney Houston movie, you gotta also give me all of it. You know what I mean? Because, like, if it's gonna be a biopic, you can't be like, all right,
where's Bobby?
But only the good parts.
Where's Bobby?
Come on, because also, like, that's her entire story.
Where's Bobby?
And for somebody somewhere in 50 years who's just going to watch this one movie, they're not going to know the true story of Whitney. They're going to watch this movie and go, oh, and then the end, she got to do the Cinderella movie.
And her life ended in glory.
Yeah, and she just, got old and retired or something. And that's just going to be the whole thing. I didn't know what happened to Audrey Hepburn.
No, that's fair.
I didn't know that she got old. We never saw any photos of her old. I assumed that she had a tragic end like Marilyn, because nobody, again, showed any videos or photos of her as an older woman. But yeah, like, it's going to be just as it's going
to be as sanitized as Bohemian Rhapsody, and this is by the writers of them. So,
oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. I think that I think that they were like, all right, watch as much Whitney Houston stuff as you can and go. And she was like, okay. Then they piped in a bunch of Whitney songs, and she said, I can be Whitney Houston. And
because I'm sure that she's not even singing it, and this isn't even like Elvis or Freddie, where I think that, and honestly, I think that with you have to choose. Do you want them to look like or sound like them? Is kind of the thing. What's your uphill battle?
Well, I mean, I guess for me, like, I don't need you to sound like the person singing. I don't need you to really look like the person singing. I need you to do be singing, though. We can always cut your voice out later, but I need you to actually be flexing your throat and crap. And B, like, I need you to evoke that person.
Yeah.
110%. I need you, whatever your energy is, to be spot on. Look,
I mean, the obvious answer for who should have been playing Whitney Houston this whole time is Keke Palmer. But
oh my God, yes! Yes.
But that's not the point here.
Because she would have also done the best Whitney voice we had ever heard. We've all heard.
She'd have thrown her whole self into it.
150%. And I'm not going to say that, like, whoever they got for the Whitney part didn't deserve it. I don't know who she is because she's too busy looking like Whitney.
But Keke would have killed it.
She would have. She would have owned it.
Mm-hmm.
No, she's waiting for the Angela Bassett biopic. She's ready for it. Keke, I love you.
You were wonderful in Nope.
Yes, completely.
And Tequila and the Bee.
You've had a life,
what a journey,
well lived of film.
What a cinematic journey.
Fantastic, Keke Palmer.
We've also lately. What have we watched lately? Honestly, we haven't really terribly watched... Oh, we watched Barbarian. That's one of the big things that we watched.
Yeah, and we totally... I forgot to write it down on the list, but that's okay.
We've been watching more of the Child's Play films. We actually watched some of them with the director's commentary, or the writer's commentary and the director's commentary on. We watched Devil in a Blue Dress, a Denzel film from 95. It's really good. I enjoyed it a lot. It's a
noir.
Yeah, it's a neo-noir film. It's based on a novel series, and it's fantastic. Young Don Cheadle is in it, and he steals the whole thing practically. He definitely steals every fucking scene he's in, minimum.
That is facts. He does phenomenal. 100% good jobs done by Don Cheadle. Honestly, it might be my favorite Don Cheadle performance that I've ever seen because honestly, I don't have a lot of movies that I've ever seen of his repertoire other than Marvel. And like, he's definitely doing a much better job than Terrence Mann. But this performance, Oscar worthy.
Let's see. Don Cheadle movies. No Sudden Moves, The Ocean's Franchise. What else? That's a good question. No, I really enjoy Don Cheadle, but this is definitely one that, for me, is a real standout because he's stealing scenes from Denzel at Denzel's, like, strongest. Sort of cinematically.
Right?
And he's just swooping in and just subtly taking scenes away from him. And I found that fascinating.
Oh my gosh, no, totally. I didn't know if it was possible. And Don Cheadle waltzed into this movie and stole my heart.
He blowout performance.
Fantastic.
Barbarian, just go watch it. I'm not going to say anything else. It's fucking...
It's an experience. Go watch it.
Go watch it. Don't watch a trailer. Don't look up anything. If you've seen a trailer, you've already seen too much. Go.
Just run on in
before
there.
anyone else can tell you anything more. Go. Do it.
Get off the internet.
That's my note on Barbarian.
Don't go if you don't like horror movies. Do not go if you don't like horror movies.
Or do.
No.
Step outside yourself. Try something new.
It's gonna be a bumpy ride.
But that's pretty much my note on that. If you have seen it, go and check out my Letterboxd review. And if you have seen it, also I'll just let y'all know. Oh my god, right? Like, wow.
Oh.
That moment? How that thing happens?
Stop it.
Surprising. That's pretty much all that I have for the listeners, dear. How about you?
No, I think that I'm plumb out of things.
Plumb out, you say. All right. Well, folks, it's been a little bit of a long week. Thank you guys, as always, for listening. Please, if you haven't, go and check out last week's episode. Check out all of our previous Hispanic Heritage episodes. Be sure to come back next week. We're doing a Netflix original. It's going to be a good time. And go and learn something new. It is so delightful to learn something new, especially that excites you. You know, if you can learn something new that you go, oh, that's useful, you know, great. But if you can learn something new that truly makes you excited, invigorated, fascinated, you want to go and learn more about it, go and discover that thing. Go and just learn something new.
Fantastic. That's words to live by, honestly. You know, I couldn't have said anything better if I tried, you know. New experiences make the mind and the body strong.
That's right. Thank you guys, as always, for listening. We'll see y'all next week. Bye.